How do you know when it's time to walk away from a career that no longer excites you? And more importantly, how do you find the courage to actually do it? Evan Rosenblum earned a master's in hotel management, then spent years working in corporate marketing, managing high-stakes campaigns for brands like Pepsi, Volkswagen, and Johnson & Johnson. But despite the prestige, something was missing. After nearly 2 decades in his field, Evan took a leap, leaving behind the stability of the corporate world to carve out a new path in real estate. But career changes aren't always smooth, and Evan's journey came with big risks, major mindset shifts, and plenty of lessons learned along the way. If you're thinking of making a massive change or considering a career in real estate, this episode is for you. Hi. Today I have with me Evan Rosenblum, all the way from California. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your background, your educational background. Let's start with that.
Well, growing up next to you, I think it was very similar to your experiences, whatever your listeners know of you, but went to private yeshiva every year up until 12th grade when I graduated. So it was definitely a different learning experience than perhaps most people have with public schools or getting bounced around from one school to the next. I was in the same school literally from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade when I graduated. So, good education for what it was worth, I think, and certainly set a certain path in my life in motion that was undeniably in full force by the time I graduated. And also something that I probably battled with a little bit as well.
Okay. And then after graduation, what happened next? You didn't go to the typical yeshiva that most people went to, that I know. So tell me about your college experience.
So after graduating, I did not go to Israel for the year like a lot of my fellow students did. I don't know if you can hear the dog, but we'll edit that out later. But I didn't go to Israel for the year like a lot of my fellow students did, but I did go straight to Queens College, which is where a lot of people who came back from Israel ended up with me. I spent all 4 years in Queens College. Actually, I forget now, but I did spend the first semester at Hofstra University and found that the Hofstra University education was a lot more expensive, but essentially the exact same that you get for a community college at Queens College. So there wasn't much of a difference other than the price there. So after a semester, I switched over to Queens College, and then I finished out college there. And like a lot of people, I sort of didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer. I knew I didn't want to be an accountant. And so I defaulted into the other major, which was media studies, which basically encompassed everything from, marketing, advertising, to film and journalism, and basically anything else that wasn't a professional field. And I started dabbling a little bit in some marketing jobs during college, and as well as some blue-collar jobs too, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And by the time I graduated, I had still no clue and had been...
I can relate to that.
Yeah, I had been a waiter, I think, for probably about 10 years in restaurants and catering and different things of that nature. And so I knew I sort of liked the service industry at the time, but didn't want to be in restaurants and didn't want to be a waiter for the rest of my life. So thought that it would be good to use that knowledge and that experience in the service industry and go to get my master's degree in a semi-related service industry field. So I went to NYU to get my master's in hotel development and investment theory, which was basically hotel management school. And that's sort of where my life kind of pivoted and went in a completely different direction from there.
First of all, did you like the school? Or you knew in it already, this is not going to be my end goal?
No, I think while I was there, I did enjoy the curriculum and I did enjoy some of the lecturers and the lecturers and the students. And I do think I remember feeling like trying to figure out where in the industry I wanted to be, what I wanted to be doing. It was a very short curriculum. Like, I think it only took me about a year and a half to get my master's. So it wasn't like it was a long time that I was like 4 years in college trying to figure all that stuff out. And from the first day, well, I took a pre-course. I took one course prior to the semester starting when I was supposed to start. So I took like a summer course, and it was my intro to my thesis class. And so by the end of the master's, you're required to write a thesis paper on a certain topic. And I did this intro course that will help outline the first couple of chapters of your thesis. And that's what I took in the summer. And then the semester started, and we have orientation. And I had done my thesis or my intro to thesis on one topic, and it was at the time was when Travelocity and Expedia and all of these websites were coming out and trying to steal money away from hotels, booking hotel rooms through their websites for less money than you can get at the hotel on their own website in for the same room and the same night. So there was a huge issue and discussion about rate parity. And that was what my topic was. And a lot of my sourcing came from two individuals and papers that they wrote. His name's Max Starkov and Jason Price.
I'm so impressed you remember that.
Well, I remember it because the day I went to orientation, I walked in a couple minutes late and listening, and this guy's up there talking about the program, but up on the board was the name Max Starkov written on the board. And I'm like, was he talking about Max? And I just did a whole paper on this guy, and now this lecture and this orientation's talking about Max. Well, it turns out he wasn't talking about him, it was Max Starkov. So it was kind of weird, and at the end of the conversation, at the end of orientation, he said how he offers paid internships. And so, of course, every single kid runs up to go speak to him to try to get a paid internship. And I was the last one there. He didn't even have any cards left to give me, but I told him, listen, I'd love to talk to you. I just did an entire paper based on what you and Jason wrote about. Like, that was the entire paper. And so I ended up having the meeting, and Max has a company, or had a company, that was a niche marketing agency for hotels. So it was an online marketing agency just for hotels, and usually smaller chains. That it was just him and Jason starting up from scratch. And so they hired me, and I was their first hire, essentially. There was one other girl there. She eventually left, but I was their first hire and helped them grow. By the time I left the company 5 years later, we had, grown. We had like 20 employees, and we had grown significantly.
That's amazing. And also really cool that you could combine that media studies, which for many people is probably useless, and tie it in with the hotel management. That's pretty impressive, I must say.
Yeah. So that's why I remember them, is because I worked for them for 5 years. But, it was a good experience, and during that time I got to learn a lot about the hotel industry, which also made me realize that I didn't want to spend 7 days a week dressed in a suit. So I decided that being in the hotel business itself wasn't something I wanted to do, but I enjoyed the marketing aspect, and so I kind of went backwards a little bit, and you never know where things are going to lead you in life, and I think that was the biggest takeaway from that, is that, had I not gone to my master's program, I might have still ended up in marketing. Most people end up falling ass backwards into that program, into that career. But
I can say that for myself, by the way, and also my husband, who also studied media studies at Queen's and also now works in marketing. You may be quite right about that.
Yeah, most of the people I met in my career in marketing, which spanned almost 2 decades, was not something that they had initially planned on. It was a job that led to a job that just turned out to be a career. and which is
Well said.
good. You know, at the end of the day, marketing is all about trying to reach a consumer audience for a particular brand or product. And the reality is that every single one of us are consumers. And so it's very easy for somebody to theoretically put themselves in that consumer's shoes because they are one of them. And so I think that's why it makes it easy for people to just step into that type of a career when there's really nothing else available or interesting to them.
That's a very, very valid point.
So,
Okay, so 5 years marketing hotels, then what?
well, I made probably the worst mistake anybody can make in their career is I took a job for money. And
Been there.
I wasn't happy with how much I was getting paid, so I took a job for money. It was a company that was a startup. It ended up dying very shortly after I left, which I was only there for about a year. You know, it was an okay experience, and I met some good people that I'm actually still in touch with today. But, you know, it wasn't what it was meant to be or what I wanted to be doing, and I left and went to pursue another job, and then I finally got to the agencies where I started working for the major players in the game, the Pepsi company and Johnson and Johnson's, and my last three clients, big clients, were Pepsi, Johnson and Johnson, and Volkswagen. And I had the pleasure of working for Pepsi during the big concern over the obesity crisis in America. I had the pleasure of working for Johnson and Johnson during the opioid epidemic. And I had the pleasure of working for Volkswagen during the emissions scandal. So, you know, it was never really so much fun, and all I just kept realizing was that I wasn't really contributing to anything good in this world. Like, I was helping these major companies make more and more and more money. It wasn't something I really enjoyed, and eventually I left that industry. And, you know, fast forward 10 years, and I've, you know, always sort of had a passion for real estate, and I completely changed my career trajectory, and I moved out to California. And now I've been able to help people one by one and get into their first home or sell their home and take on a new chapter in their life. And it's definitely a much more fulfilling and rewarding career at that point.
Okay, so you put so much information into that tiny little sound bite. So let's take a step back and let me ask you, what was the thought process that you had from saying, okay, I don't want this, to, okay, it's going to be real estate? Like, how did you choose real estate from all the careers out there in the world?
Well, you know, like I said, I always wanted to be involved in real estate. I had bought property when I lived in New York, wanted to sort of make money off of that while also trying to have a place to live at the time, but thought it would become a good investment. I wanted to, in the early 2000s, I was interested in real estate. I went to some seminars, I wanted to flip homes, but I realized that I didn't really have the cash on hand to sort of do that, and at least from what I knew about flipping homes at the time. It was also one of the seminars I went to was somewhat of a scam where they wanted to drain my entire credit card so that I can pay for them, and then they would teach me how to do it. So I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I came out to California, but I knew I had this real estate desire, and I wanted it to make it a part of my financial goals and my financial retirement, plan. So I did what I thought was the smartest thing to do, which was to start studying for my real estate license, thinking that I would learn more about real estate by doing that, and couldn't have been more wrong. You don't learn anything about real estate taking your real estate license coursing.
Wait, for people, just to pause for 1 second, for people that are thinking about going into real estate, just maybe please explain a little bit about what's involved in the licensing and why you don't learn enough about it. And is that specific for California, or that could be anywhere, if you happen to know?
I don't know. So every state has their own set of laws, and there is some reciprocity when you cross state lines, but every state has their own process. I can't tell you what it's like to take the course for any other state other than California, but the process for California I believe it's similar to most, where you have to go through certain schooling, and it's usually go at your own pace. You take online courses, and you are required to take a certain number of hours of courses. And it's sort of like college. Some of them have to be specific courses that you're taking, and some of them have to be electives that you get to choose the types of whatever courses that you want to choose from. And there's like a total of like 5 courses that you take. It's not like a lot, but you do take these courses, and most of them are on ethics or zoning or, the numbers that go into real estate, like how many feet make up a mile, right? Like things that you don't really need to know that every real estate agent jokes about because it's 43,500 and I have it written down. 43,560. So, like everybody knows what that is, but it doesn't help us with anything in real life, right? Becoming a real estate agent isn't about, yes, ethics are important. Yes, knowing zoning is important. Yes, but it's not, it's maybe like 5% of the job. The rest of it is how to sell, how to find clients, how to.
And they don't teach you that at real estate school?
No, that's where your brokerage or your team comes in handy to help facilitate that. You got your license, but you're sort of at that point like, what do I do now? Because it's so far different, from what they're teaching you. And again, that's why I had studied, was to get that information so I can buy properties and learn how to invest and things like that. And just to go back for a second, but I had at the time been looking into getting a job out here in California doing the same thing I was doing in New York in marketing. I had been I got to like the final rounds of interviews, and like they just ghosted me, or was like never heard back from these people, or I didn't get the job for some really stupid reasons. And I just was reminded instantly of how terrible the industry was and how much I hated working there. And so by the time that happened for like the third or fourth time, I was just like, all right, I'm done begging people for jobs. I just got my license. Let me at least try this. Let me see if I can go this route, help people do this. And it worked out, thankfully. Like I was able to sell a lot of houses in my first year. I was able to,
You were on your own or with the brokerage?
Well, you always have to hang your license at a brokerage, at least for the first couple of years, because then you can be eligible to get your own broker's license.
Gotcha.
At that point, you're able to start your own brokerage. But just because you're at a brokerage doesn't necessarily mean that they're helping you do anything. So I had started at one brokerage, which was Keller Williams, and probably a lot of people, if not everybody, has heard of them. And they're good because they teach you. They have a lot of courses that you can take either for free or paid courses at the brokerage that they'll help you figure out what I thought I would be learning in real estate school, but not, and teach you how to find clients and how to go about selling. And they give you a mentor who can help guide you through your first couple of deals. That mentor also takes a lot of your money for those first couple of deals. So, they always say don't expect to make any money in your first year of being a realtor. And it's fairly true from what I've seen. Most realtors these days, I think there was a stat that I saw that was like 75% of realtors didn't do a single deal last year. And that's experience.
Is that because of the market?
Yeah, because of the market and everything that's going on. But yeah, it's a tough industry. And especially out here in LA and in California, I think the numbers are that 1/3 of all realtors in the US are in California. So
wow.
33% of all realtors in the nation are here in this state. So there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of people who do it one time, and they'll like help somebody that they know buy a house, but they have another full-time job. So you have a lot of competition because everybody's got a friend or a family member who's always a realtor. And you just got to prove that your knowledge is better, or will be more helpful to them, I should say. But yeah, so you got the brokerage that's helping you a little bit. Then I moved to another brokerage, which is the Jason Mitchell Group, which has helped me much more significantly in terms of giving me a lot more opportunities for clients because they have relationships with a lot of different companies that provide these at-bats for us. My first deal on my first year on my own, I did six transactions, and the
Wow.
second year I did 20. So
Wow.
the third year I did 20. The fourth year I did 20. So I've basically been able to condense the same number of transactions that many agents have had in their 20 or 10-year career in a span of 3 to 5 years. So, it helped me to really advance that learning curve. And that's really how you learn in this industry is by doing, and I think in a lot of jobs, that's how you learn, but
Absolutely.
certainly here. So it's definitely advanced my informational database there to help sell, to help be able to find clients and help those clients buy or sell houses.
Would you say that your marketing background also helped, or it's a different type of skill between the sales and the marketing?
I think it helps to some degree, but I think one of the things that I found was that, as I said, you as a person are a consumer and you can easily um, try to pick apart an ad that you've seen because, like that was a terrible way to, reach these types of people. Like it had, whatever, no effect on me. But what I've realized the hardest thing to do as a real estate agent or an entrepreneur in general is do your own marketing because you are so heavily engrossed in your own business or your own product or what you're selling and what you're trying to sell that it's hard to take a step away and see it from a 30,000-foot view and put together a real cohesive marketing strategy for yourself because you see it the way that you know it, but you don't see it the way that other consumers will see it who don't know you at all or don't know your product at all. So that's been a very different learning curve as far as marketing goes, is how to market yourself as opposed to market
Absolutely.
somebody else's product.
Well, I think you nailed it pretty much just by branding yourself as the realtor Evan. You know, that's not so common, at least in what I've seen from realtors. Most people are just like, Joe Schmo, comma, realtor. So it stands out, at least to me. Every time I see it, I'm like, there he is again.
Yeah. Well, it came just from making a lot of cold calls that first year, and every time I picked up the phone, it would be like, "Hi, it's the Realtor Evan." Like I had to introduce myself as who I was, right? And they don't know me. Hi, I'm Evan Rosenblum, as nobody knows who that is. But if I say, "Oh, I'm a realtor," or "I was the Realtor Evan you spoke to the other day,"
Right. But it works,
so
I
that's
think.
where it came from. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask maybe a sensitive question, but I'm curious how you navigated going from a steady paycheck in your home state to an unsteady paycheck in a new state. Was that scary? How did that feel? How did you go through that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the reality is that I didn't go straight, from one to the other. So when I moved, I took some time off trying to reassess what I was going to do with my life and, you know, where I was going to go. So I had already been at a point where I wasn't working. So it was just about spending money and not having any income.
How long was that time off? Just curious.
3 years, so
Okay.
I took some time off. I was semi-retired for a couple of years. So
Good for you.
yeah, we played golf every day and just, I was able to really, disassociate and reassess. It was a good time.
That's an
So,
amazing luxury I don't think everyone can afford, but if you can do it, then, you know,
yeah. So,
great.
yeah, exactly. It was great. I got a dog. So, I was able to spend his first year training him. Not so great.
Amazing.
We did it the best we could. And so, yeah, so I didn't have that, it wasn't instantly from one to the next. So I'd already been at a point where I wasn't really, hurting where I thought like, okay, if I stopped working, I'm not going to have any money because I was already in that position. So
Right. But
now
you
it
didn't
took,
feel like now I need a steady paycheck because I'm kind of blown through my savings?
No, I think I felt like it was time to start making money and it was time to start earning some money back. But it wasn't that I needed a steady paycheck. It was that I needed to find a job that I was going to be happy at. And,
Absolutely.
I think that that made it a lot more fun. I feel like if I went back to the old things that I was doing before, I would just be as miserable as I was and, not it wouldn't last. So I'd be in the same position a year later, if not sooner.
Absolutely.
So I was happy for the new challenge, and there were certainly a lot of, naysayers, and there were a lot of people who were supportive. But, at the end of the day, the security I find of a paycheck, while it's great when it's happening, is not real security either because you don't know that you're going to wake up with a job tomorrow. So,
Fair point.
anybody going through some downsizing now is probably familiar with that. So it sucks. And then you're at the mercy of finding somebody else to pay you, which is the same thing that you are as an entrepreneur where you're looking for clients because you're at the mercy of finding another client who's going to pay you. And, during that time that I was semi-retired, like I think the last year I had been doing some marketing consulting gigs. So it wasn't like I was completely, taking time off. It was just that like I wanted to go in a different direction. So, but yeah, I think that I was expecting not to make any money for the first year. And if I hadn't made any money for the first year, I probably would have stuck with it for a little while longer because that's what I was expecting. But at the end of the day, that wasn't the case for me. I started in 2019, and so right then we hit COVID. And so that, next year was like really a very different and difficult year as a real estate agent. But given that I was able to persevere through that, and then 2021 come out even more ahead, it just felt like it was right. So
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like on a day-to-day basis to be a realtor, maybe for people who are considering that as a career path?
well, I can tell you what it should look like, but I can't
Okay,
tell
let's
you.
start there.
A lot depends on what your situation is, and if you are you a solo agent? Are you working for a team? Are you running your own brokerage? Right, like so, all of that's is going to be dependent on what your situation is. Where are you getting your leads from, essentially? Assuming you're a solo agent, which is how most people start out, and even if you're on a team, the goal is for you to be generating some leads and some clients. You're probably going to be wanting to spend several hours a day, if not several days during the week, farming for leads and trying to recruit some leads. And that can look, there's a lot of different approaches to that. And it's the same if you were having pretty much any type of job in real estate, if you were a wholesaler or if you were a fix and flipper, or you've got to look for inventory, you've got to look for clients. So
I would argue it's like that for any entrepreneur at all, whether you're a lawyer or, I had a different guest who does workshops. Everyone who is on their own has to find a way to get business. So in that sense, it's probably very similar.
yeah, I always marvel at doctors because it always seems like they never have a need to find business. Their waiting rooms are always full and always overpacked, and it's like you have an appointment, but so do three other people for the exact same time. So no matter what time you get there, you're going to be waiting, and there's no respect for anybody there. But it's just to me, it's always like fascinating how doctors are always in business.
Because there aren't as many of them, maybe, as there are realtors.
That's the funny thing. I feel like there are more, So, anyways, but especially whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is, yes, for any entrepreneurial venture, a large part of your work is going to be sales. And so, as a real estate agent, you can be doing cold calling, you can be doing door knocking, which a lot of people have given up on because of COVID. You can be doing marketing online and offline. You can, have your name on bus benches, or you can be sending out flyers, which you probably have received in your mail from realtors in the past. So there's a lot of different approaches to how you can find clients, but every single one of them is different. I can't do cold calling and door knocking to find buyers because most people who are in those houses or on the title records that I'm calling are going to be owners. They're not going to be renters. So renters are going to be in apartment buildings typically. So, to find buyers, you need to go through different approaches. You need to make alliances with lenders because that's who the buyer's calling to try to get a pre-approval so that they can figure out how much money they have to spend. Or you want to call your friends and family and tell them what you're doing and let them know you're a realtor now, and, if anybody needs help, just send them your way. So, there's a lot of approaches to that, but whatever the approach is, the experts say to pick one. Do your friends and family for sure, but pick one of the approaches. Don't door knock and send postcards and cold call and whatever. It's too much. You need to focus on one, angle and go after that. And you probably want to spend a few hours, if not half the day, every day doing that. And that's going to generate, some of you as a realtor. It's going to generate maybe some interest or some referrals to you. And you have to always remember that with any types of sales product or type of sales company, whatever you're doing now is probably going to be done to generate money 3 to 6 months from now. So you're not looking to go door knocking and find a client who you're going to list their home today. So, you always have to be working. And if you ever stop getting money, go look back to see what you were doing 3 months ago. Because if you stop making those phone calls, that's why you're not making any money now, 3 months later.
That's a really good strategy, it sounds like.
I did a lot of, we talked about going to school for real estate, but once I got my license, in the next couple of years, I'm not a big reader. I know you and my sister like to read, but I'm not a big reader. So I do a lot of audiobooks, and I probably listen to 100 books on building a business, marketing, cold calling, whatever it was.
I've also changed over to a lot of audiobooks, mostly because I guess at our age I fall asleep a lot. So I need to do it in the car, and I've been learning a ton like that.
Yeah,
also.
So self-help or, growing types of books. Those are really what helped me figure out how to do this job. It's not just necessary, and like you said, it's that information can be helpful regardless of what industry or type of entrepreneur or business owner. That information can be used and transferable to any type of industry. It doesn't, whatever type of entrepreneur or business owner, that information is transferable to everything. It's not necessarily just for real estate.
Yeah. And there's so much out there. Sometimes it's overwhelming. You could just go into the black hole of learning, which is on one hand amazing, and on the other hand, a real time drain.
Yeah, it could be. It was like going to get the masters. You never know where things are going to lead you to, or what piece of information you're going to get from listening to a book or going to a meeting or going to a conference, or just anything might help trigger something. Just going to listening to a meeting or a podcast oftentimes reminds me of what I should be doing that day. What's the best tactic to go or try to do something new.
Me too. Then my brain is swimming, and I find myself up at 4 a.m. thinking about, an idea that I heard about last night before I went to sleep. And, it's a vicious cycle in a lot of ways. Tell me, what advice would you give someone who is thinking about changing into real estate? Or what's the one thing let's start with, what's the one thing you wish someone would have told you before you went down that path?
I don't know if there's anything that I wish that somebody would have told me. There are definitely things that I would tell people, like, for example, the best thing that you can do for yourself as a new agent is join an experienced team instead of going at it on your own, which I found out, but I don't think I found that out early enough, or if I did, I was like, I'll do this by myself at first.
Were you on your own at first, or you were with Keller Williams at first?
Well, I was with Keller Williams at my brokerage, but again, that brokerage is just where I hang my license. They're not helping me to grow my business in any way whatsoever.
Thanks for clarifying that. That's important.
Yeah, so when you join a brokerage, their goal is to take your money. That's their goal. So you hang your license at their brokerage. You cannot practice real estate unless you are part of a brokerage. And unless you have your own broker's license, that usually means going to a brokerage, and you're going to be paying them a fee. You're going to be paying them maybe monthly dues. You're going to be paying them for each transaction. Maybe you'll pay them a little bit of both, but there's going to be fees associated with that brokerage, but they're not inclined for any reason to help you get clients. So you're on your own. The best way to go about learning and getting clients when you're first brand new is to join a team. Because if you join a team, then your team leader, who's still potentially part of the same brokerage, right? You're all at that same brokerage, but you're a team, you're a subset of the brokerage. So at Keller Williams, there's hundreds of teams, depending on where you are at Keller Williams. There might be 5 in this Keller Williams brokerage and 7 in the other Keller Williams brokerage. But if you join an experienced team, then you are going to be able to, first of all, learn from the experience of your team leader and the other people on the team. And second of all, you're going to be able to use that experience in your marketing. So you can say, my team has 30 years of experience, whereas you just started yesterday.
Right.
So, like you're able to benefit from that immediately when you start talking to people.
I think that applies to a lot of industries, actually. Like I see a lot of PR people and marketing, agencies and consultants of all different types. Most people don't go out on their own at first. They start off, learn the tricks of the trade, and then ultimately go out on their own.
Yeah, I mean, like business consultants will usually start at one of the big 3, Deloitte and whatever. And
accountants also.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then they'll go out on their own once they've learned the trade. And it's all, a lot of people will do that. But that's definitely the best approach. Thankfully, after the first year of doing it by myself, I found a great team to join, which gave me the opportunity to do somewhat of a hybrid model where I'm on a team. They help generate leads. Any of the leads that they generate are team leads, but any of the leads that I generate are my own self-generated leads. And so when it works out a little bit better financially in that situation. So that for me was the best move because nothing got taken away. I only gained from that decision.
Yeah, that does sound good. I think I remember reading somewhere that you also do projects, like investment projects, not just residential. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so I mean, as a realtor, you are generally focused on either residential or commercial type of realtor business. Most of my real estate business is residential when it comes to helping other people buy. But the other side to the business is the commercial side, which is office buildings or shopping malls or strip malls or even multifamily apartments, right? So anything with 5 or more units is considered commercial class buildings. So even though it's a residential building, it's commercial class buildings. And so, I can help people with that. I am knowledgeable in it, but most of my knowledge for that comes from buying my own investment properties and looking for my own investments. Most of that has been done out of state, out of California, which is probably a whole different topic as to why that is. But
I'm guessing a lot has to do with the prices.
Not even so much the pricing. It is helpful, but it is, it's more about the laws. And, simply put, in America, if you're in a blue state, or Democratic state, it's going to be a lot more tenant friendly. And if you have a tenant who is causing problems, even if they're causing you problems, it's going to be a lot harder to evict them and get in a tenant who's not causing you problems. So I always choose to invest in the more red states, where if I'm having those problems, it's very easy to get rid of them, which I'm experiencing right now as we talk about it. So, it's not the easiest approach, but yeah, we do invest, me and my wife, we invest in real estate and different size projects, single family houses to, I think the biggest one we have is one that has 80 units on it. So,
wow, nice. And do you think that having the education in real estate helped you with that, or you were going to do that anyway?
It definitely helped me to, ramp up what I know about real estate and how to negotiate the deals and the outlook. And, I'm always in tune with the market, but I was planning on doing that sort of investment anyways. So even if I didn't go into becoming a realtor, I probably wanted to have real estate investments for my financial future.
As a professional realtor and as an investor yourself, would you say that it's something an average Joe can do without knowledge, or it's something you need knowledge, but you can learn it on the internet or through books, or mostly through school, a course of some sort?
Yeah, I would say that the average Joe can probably do it, and I've seen average Joes left and right become millionaires from doing it. It's not difficult to buy a house. You might lose a lot of money if you do it wrong, but it's not a difficult thing. It can be complicated, and like any investment, there is a certain amount of risk involved with it. And you should understand that risk before you just jump in with both feet. But anybody can do it, and it certainly would be encouraged, at least by me, for people to either own a house or invest in a property. I mean, I just saw an example of how from 1999, the cost of housing, at least in the Philadelphia market, the income levels increased by about 50% to 100%. So depending on the type of job that you had, you could be making double what you made in 1999, whereas the price of housing has increased 250%.
And here it's like 500%.
Yeah, so
it's insane.
The housing market's always going to outpace those things. And so you are going to, theoretically, you should be building your net worth by owning property, if you do it the right way. And I would say that the best way for any average Joe to learn about investing in real estate is, aside from talking to an experienced investor or speaking to a realtor and learning more and going online and doing all that stuff, there's a website called Bigger Pockets, and it is the #1 website for helping investors learn about investing, and mostly with single family properties or smaller properties, not the commercial size properties. So there are some people on there that can help with that, but for the general rule of thumb, they're very helpful for teaching somebody how to buy a single house and rent that house out.
That is really, really useful. I will drop that in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but there's other, companies out there that'll do turnkey investments where they've already gone in, they've fixed the place up, they've put a tenant in place, they have a property manager there, the property's making money, and they'll sell you the property for a certain amount of money. In that way, you don't have to really do anything other than keep paying the bills or find a new property manager or find a new tenant or whatever it might be. So it's very easy for people to invest. You just have to know how to, I think, the best thing that you can arm yourself with, the best information you can arm yourself with for any investment is understanding the numbers. So if you understand how the numbers play out and you can underwrite an investment and a deal, then you can tell if it's worth doing or not and go from there.
Wow, that's a lot to process, but it definitely sounds like an optimistic outlook and something that could be worthwhile for the right type of investor.
Yeah, it definitely has to be the right type.
Yeah. Okay, so just as a final question, if you had one piece of advice for your younger self, what would that be?
I think that the advice that I would have given to myself would have been, knowing what I know now, would have been to start doing real estate earlier, follow my path and my desires a little bit earlier. One of the reasons I didn't was because I said to myself, I have a good career. Why mess with that? And so I'm not going to, try anything else on the side. I think all of life comes down to effort and hustle, and what you put in is what you get out. And so, it's now as an entrepreneur, you're forced to hustle. When you have a job and you're living paycheck to paycheck, or you're not living paycheck to paycheck, you're just getting paychecks and you have a very comfortable living, you're not forced to hustle. You're forced to work at that job 9 to 5 and that's it. And the rest of your time you can goof off. But as an entrepreneur, you're forced to hustle, and it changes your mindset. And I think that, what we're seeing for most people, especially young kids, doing even stuff on Instagram where they're making money by themselves as, a content creator, or whatever they want to be called these days, is all about hustling. And those that hustle are going to make money. And it changes your mentality, it changes your lifestyle, and it changes what your willingness is to do. Because I went from sitting back and joking around most of the weekends and nights when I had a full-time B2 salary to now I'm a realtor. I'm starting up another project as a realtor to help people buy houses on their own so that they don't have to pay for realtors if they can't afford that help. We have our investments that I've got to work on. I started a company on the side because I needed a virtual assistant. So I have that, which about, where I help people that come to us and need additional support for their entrepreneurial efforts. So we have that business that is sort of a side project. And then we have, I'm working on buying new businesses as investments. So, the limits, it kind of becomes limitless when you think about how much effort you need to put into these things. But it just starts with the willingness to put in effort. And if you're unwilling to do that because you have a comfortable job that pays you, then, sometimes you're going to be in for if that job is no longer there. And that's where a lot of people get upset at companies and governments and whatever, because they're not helping them out. Whereas they should have been helping, in my opinion. It's not just up to everybody else to help you. It's nice that they can, but everybody should help themselves, I think. And
I totally agree.
People to try to do what they can for themselves, because you can do it, and it's possible. And sure, if you need the help, the government and companies and people will be there to support you, hopefully. But, everybody should be responsible for themselves, and is my own philosophy. And you are capable of anything you put your mind to. And I think that that's something that probably wasn't instilled enough in us growing up in school and in college. And we went to college because we were told that if you went to college, you'd have a lot more opportunities out there to get a job. But it's not about necessarily, for me anymore these days, it's not about getting the job. It's about how much effort can I put in on a given day to help myself live.
I love that.
It's like, live like nobody else wants to right now so that you can live like nobody else can later. The more you put in, the more you get out.
Wow, there's really a lot to unpack there, but I don't want to keep you all night. So I'm going to end it there. I will put a link to the VA service in the show notes as well, in case anybody needs some extra help. And if you want, you can send me like a short description about that to just tell people about that in case they're interested. Thank you so much for your time. This was really fascinating.
Yeah.
And I hope you get lots of more deals.
Yeah, me too.